Plate 2. Reconstruction of the temple at Al-Ubaid. Al-Ubaid, a little mound lying 4 miles north of the city of Ur, gave its name to the pre-flood pottery, of which quantities strewed the ground surface, evidence of a prehistoric settlement, but the mound itself was made up of the ruins of a little temple of a much latter date. Amongst the mass of fallen plano-convex bricks was found the dedication stone, a small tablet bearing the inscription in archaic characters: A-Ane-Padda, king of Ur, son of Mes-Ane-Padda, king of Ur, has built this for his lady Nin-Karsag. The name Ane-Padda was new to us, but Mes-Ane-Padda was familiar as the first king of what the Sumerian annalists call the first dynasty of Ur. The tablet proved for the first time the historical evidence of this dynasty, which must have borne sway somewhere about 3000 BCE. The temple stood on a platform built of sun-dried bricks with a buttressed facing of burnt brick, resting on rough limestone foundations. See page 14. It was approached by a flight of finely cut limestone stairs, the outside of the staircase being paneled with wood. The platform was preserved virtually to its full height, but of its superstructure, the temple proper, nothing was left in situ. It had been violently overthrown, and its mud brick walls razed to their foundations, but against the platform's foot, great masses of those walls lay one above the other, and to their underside there still adhered the element of the decoration of the temple facade. By planning each wall fragment, its position, and the angle at which it lay, and each piece of ornament exactly as it had fallen, it was possible to fix the place of each in relation to the others, and so to work out a fairly accurate reconstruction of the original facade. The stone steps led to a level stairhead covered by an open porch, which was upheld by columns made of palm logs, sheathed in copper and roofed with slender copper-plated timbers. The porch projected from a shallow pylon or gate tower, a feature which was to be traditional in Sumerian ecclesiastical architecture. The doorway was flat-topped, and its jambs probably were splayed with double reveals, and against them stood on either side of the entrance a column of palm wood overlaid with mosaic, supporting as an architrave a great copper relief which bore the heraldic design of an eagle grasping with its claws 2 antlered stags. The relief was hammered out of sheet metal, but the heads were hollow castings in the round, made separately and riveted to the background. The doorway itself was flanked by life-size figures of lions made of copper beaten over a wooden core, with inlaid eyes and teeth and tongues. The gate tower stood flush with the platform's edge. The wall of the shrine proper therefore was set back a little, and along this ledge there stood a row of statues of oxen made of copper beaten over with wooden cores. They stood in profile, but their heads were turned outward to the spectator. Behind them, the lower part of the temple facade was decorated with rosettes, clay pegs, with flowers of alternate white and red petals attached with bitumen and copper wire. In the drawing, these are shown standing upright and free, which was what the evidence seemed to me to indicate, but parallels found later on the other sites prove that my view was wrong, and the flower stems were embedded in the brickwork with only the heads showing, flush with the wall surface. Above this ran a frieze of copper bowls, the animals represented as reclining, but in the act to rise in profile, with the head turned outwards. Here again the bodies are reposes in relief, and the heads cast in the round are attached. Higher up the wall was a second frieze. This had a copper frame with which the figures cut out in white shell are in limestone and silhouetted against a mosaic background of a black shale. There's a very striking difference between the shell figures, which are beautifully made, modeled in delicate relief and finely polished, and the limestone figures, which are rougher and lacking in detail in spite of the fact that they belong to the most important part of the frieze. It seems probable that whereas the shell was left white, the limestone was painted. The subject of the frieze is a scene on the temple farm. A long procession of cattle advances to the center, where they are being milked in front of the buyer. A typical construction of logs and reed matting. Shaven temple servants squat on the ground under the cows' tails and milk them from behind. Others carry off the milk and pass it through the strainer and pour it into a great stone jar. The procession of cattle is interrupted only by a curious square panel showing a bearded bull attacked by a lion-headed eagle. This is a mythological subject which would be out of place if the rest were only what it seems, a simple pastoral scene, itself scarcely suited for the adornment of a temple. There can be little doubt that the whole is symbolic, and on the temple farm, the priest of Nin Karsag are preparing the milk of the mother entity, which was the life-giving nectar of kings. The description of plate 3 should read, the frieze of bulls from the Al-Ubaid temple. And C28. Higher up on the wall was another frieze. Limestone doves, these were roughly silhouetted and must certainly have been painted against the usual black shell background. The whole building was joyful and fanciful, with the gleaming copper of its statues and reliefs, and its many-colored mosaic columns, its rosettes and its painted friezes and bands against the whitewashed wall face. Very sophisticated, the scheme of its decoration obeying a recognized rule of perspective whereby at the base, virtually at eye level, came the figures in the round, then the reliefs, then the modeled mosaic frieze, and above them all, the flat silhouetted birds. It was no primitive art that produced the Rococo temple of Nin Karsag, but an art fully developed, experimented, and almost decadent. And plate 3 we'll obviously have to get to after we take a look at plate 2. And one of the things we have to look at with mythology, well, we don't have to, but we really should, is that these things weren't detached from physical life. These statements weren't detached from technology and philosophy and, it's only our modern way of we have a day where we go to church for an hour or something where we start thinking these things.